Welcome to Neo Tokyo 2019. I'm number 69.
Nice.
Matisse Van Rossum.
I am Tetsuo!
Kaneda!
Tetsuo!
Cleveland!
That's me, Cleveland. I'm here and having a great time.
Yeah, and I'm Ben, and yeah, we're gonna talk about Akira.
Yes, we are.
This was one of Cleveland's picks.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, diving into the world of animated horror, sci-fi horror. Cleveland, talk a little bit about Akira and why you were drawn to it and why you wanted to talk about it on the show.
Most definitely. Well, all right, so Akira is directed by acclaimed artist Katsuhiro Otomo, and it is set in the distant future of 2019.
No shit.
The distant year of 2019, post the events of World War III, where there was some sort of mysterious detonation in the center of Tokyo. Decades later, the city has been rebuilt into Neo Tokyo, and we get our wonderful set piece of cyberpunk delight. It's the sort of the standard fare, like Neo Tokyo backdrop. I say standard fare, but it's gorgeous and illustrious. One of the hallmarks of this film is its attention to detail. Visually, there's just shot after shot of high detailed backgrounds that are usually only up on the screen for a second or so, and they're all fully illustrated. The film centers around Kaneda, who is a young punk who's out and about and looking for trouble, and his friend Tetsuo, who is picked up by a secretive government organization and tested upon and made to be a powerful psychic. And as we slowly learn the events, or all the connotation around who and what Akira is. About, I think, sums up the general plot.
Yeah.
Like,
It's based on the serialized graphic novel of the same name by the same artist, which I just read in preparation for this episode. One of the things that I'm particularly impressed by this movie is how different it is from the graphic novel, but how well it still captures the same themes and ideas broadly. Because the graphic novel is like 39 issues or something like that.
massive.
Like 80 pages a piece. Like, it's long. It's an epic. And this movie is 2 hours long. And it's narratively extremely different. I had seen Akira before in college, was my first exposure to it. And then reading the graphic novel and seeing, like, just how wildly different it was a big surprise to me, and honestly, like, big props to Katsuhiro Otomo to, like, be able to adapt this in such a way where it feels like a true adaptation of the story, but is narratively so different.
Oh yeah.
I think part of the reason why it works so well, kind of getting these same ideas as the graphic novels, is because it's also written and directed by Otomo.
Right.
And, like, he had strict creative control over it, which
Always
really
helps.
helps.
Always helps. Yeah, it's really an excellent film. We watched the new Blu-ray version, and I was just blown away by how incredible it looked.
Man,
like,
you could really sit in theaters today, and it'd still blow people's minds. It's so
it's
gorgeous.
nuts. Like,
Yeah.
I always saw, like, the DVD version before, which still looks fine, but, like, man, the fidelity on the Blu-ray is just, like, incredible.
Oh yeah,
Just
all
the
the
attention to detail.
all the
yeah.
tracers and glowing lights on the motorcycles, and all the special effects from the psychics. And
Yeah, it's great.
It's just high detail. Every time a wall or something is destroyed or something crumbles, you just get to see all that really tight animation of all the little cracking, falling rocks, and there's a lot of that in this movie.
Well, one of the interesting things I read is at the time this was the most expensive anime production of all time.
Sure.
I believe it.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, this came out.
And,
This came out in '88, so it was even in, like, the early days of Studio Ghibli, which has become sort of like the titan of Japanese animated films. But I believe the fuck out of this being really expensive. Like,
Yeah.
the detail of the animation, it must have taken forever. I can't imagine, like, how many animators were working on this at any given time.
Oh yeah, it's insane. That goes for the graphic novel series as well, which yeah, you're not kidding. It's massive. It takes
It's
up
long, yeah.
it takes up half my bookshelf.
It's over 1,000 pages.
I mean, just in like a single panel, not even on a page, but just in like a small like quadrant panel, you'll see the windowsills like fully worked up in the background a block away in some of those sequences. Like it's nuts. It's just unfathomable how one person did so much of those illustrations. What a productive guy.
Yeah, no
God.
kidding. And I mean, it's really also, one of the major benchmarks of like the cyberpunk subgenre. Like, this along with Blade Runner are probably the two biggest benchmarks of that, from the same decade as well, not that many years separated.
Yeah, it's like that and Neuromancer, and you've about covered all the big ones.
And was Neuromancer even adapted into a visual medium? It's just a novel,
No.
isn't it? Yeah, I didn't
guess,
think so.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever adapted.
So yeah, in terms of like visual mediums, I mean, obviously Akira is a graphic novel first and foremost, but Blade Runner and Akira are like the two big ones that I think we owe for a lot of what science fiction looks like today. Man, you can see why it still holds up so well. It's been years since I've seen Akira, and I was just, watching it, and I was like, man, this is still so good. It still holds up so well.
I could watch it every day.
Yeah. We should mention that we watched the 2001 dub. There's a couple of different versions out there. You have the classic Japanese version, which is quite good. The original English dub, which is
Not good.
not
I think
good.
that was the
Very
one that I
bad.
had seen before this one.
Same.
Yeah, that's
And yeah, the 2001 dub is really good.
yeah,
great.
yeah. I was blown away by it. I've seen this movie like 5 or 6 times at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And the first few times I saw it with the original English dub, and I was not as blown away by the movie. I think mostly
Yeah.
just because of the dub just kind of ruins the vibe of the movie. But
That's why I'm generally a proponent of subs over dubs, depending on the dub. That's a whole,
I'm always so torn because I mean, first off, like I'm not that torn actually. Like, it's usually like, okay, subs, of course. I wanna get that. I would just finish the series in subs. But for this film, it's just so highly rendered that I just want to spend all of my visual power looking at all
yeah,
of the
I
art.
definitely
reading
agree.
It's just so vivid, and like I have no problem doing both. I
And
can read and do that,
additionally,
but it's
you know,
just there's so much to see.
the story of this film is pretty complex, and like
Yes.
being able to understand it when it's spoken helps that a little bit, I think. You're still getting it when you're
Yeah.
reading it, but like some of the contextual stuff of how things are said is a little easier to pick up on. I thought the 2001 dub was incredible. I love the music of this movie too.
Oh yeah, the
yeah,
soundtrack.
the score is incredible.
It's very Steve Reich
Yeah,
inspired
it
at times.
is. I agree. Like, a lot of it sounds like Steve Reich, to the extent that I was surprised that it was not just a Steve Reich score. But I mean, it makes sense at the time in the 80s. Like, he would have been an extremely influential musical figure.
Yeah.
The music, it goes a long way to like really setting the tone for this movie. It's really like, it's bizarre though. It's not something, a score that you would expect to hear in a
No,
movie like
it
this.
doesn't feel like it's definitely not your standard fare like cyberpunk score. It's not as synth heavy as you would expect.
Yeah.
There are a few like synth sequences in it, but for the most part, it's like it's choral.
It's choral and it's percussion heavy.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of like marimba and stuff like that, which is what makes me
analog
think
percussion.
of Steve Reich,
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, it does still feel like very Japanese, which I think is good for the film, since it
Oh,
obviously
yeah.
is a Japanese film that takes place in Neo Tokyo.
One of my favorite examples of that is during the beginning of the film when Kaneda and his mates go out for a ride, and they go out for that joyride in the city. You get those beautiful like shots of Neo Tokyo at night, panning up and down, all the varied colors like dappling the sky, and their motorbikes with their tracers, and they're going out to ride, and it's playing like almost like a marimba rhythm that's
Yeah.
like it's very like safari-esque, like it sounds like something
In a way,
that, like,
yeah.
you'd be going out for a hunt on. And I love that comparative. It's like they're just in a concrete jungle, and they're just young warriors going out for a hunt,
They're going out for a rumble with another biker gang.
That's right.
The clowns.
Yeah, it's really interesting how much the music kind of informs the tone of a lot of these scenes. I saw this movie a month or two ago live with some live music played with it, and the person who did it did a really great job. It was all like modular synth.
Was it one?
Yeah,
dude?
it was one dude. Really dark synth stuff. Really
Cool.
kind of weirder, synthier, arpeggiated stuff, but it gave the movie so much of a different vibe than it has
I believe
now.
that.
And
You were watching that one in the original Japanese
Yeah.
too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool.
So-
It's crazy how much just like a different score and also like a different language can influence the tone of a film. I was a little on the fence about watching the English dub because for the sake of purity to talk about it on the show, I wanted to see it in the original Japanese. But honestly, like this dub was so good, like I didn't have a problem with it at all. Especially because beforehand we watched that side by side video of the 91 English dub and the 2001 English dub, and holy shit, the difference is staggering. That the original English dub is just so bad. It's so trash.
It's rough.
It's like the actors don't have any idea of like how to inflect like a human being. It's like what are you doing? It's like they're trying to do Japanese inflections with English, which just doesn't work the same way that you can't speak Japanese with English inflection.
Yeah, they're more trying to reflect the inflection rather than like the actual intent behind
Right,
that.
exactly. Yeah, it's
And
a
it
a
messes
mess.
with
Yeah,
it.
they're just reading lines. Like it's not good. So yeah, I guess to get like more in depth, the young gang, they go out for a biker ride in tandem. We bear witness to this child who's is on the run with an older gentleman. We see a tighter cut, and it's not a child, or it is a child, but they look like an old person.
Yeah, that's
really
the weird Akira
weird-looking
thing. The psychic kids that look like old people.
They're being chased by the military. The guy looking after the kid is shot to death, viscerally too. I mean, the blood effects are insane.
It's been a long time. I'd
Like,
forgotten
he gets, like,
how
fully, like, shot
how
by a
really
firing squad.
violent and
Yeah.
graphic Akira is.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a very violent movie. And it's always done like the violence is so well and powerfully portrayed in this film.
Yeah.
Every time it's with such a strong degree of intent, which, like watching so much modern anime that's so often like really like shonen jumpy and cartoony, where violence is cartoonified and very meaningless and just thrown out regularly.
hyperbolic too.
Yeah. That in this case, like the violence has just such a strong impact. So the guy is just shot by an entire firing squad of people, like, and he's already like prone at that point, and so he's just ragdolled. The weird old psychic boy starts screaming, and he lets out this sort of banshee wail that breaks a lot of lights and stuff, and he runs off.
Well, what I love about that is it's more than just that, because you would expect in a normal anime or something, any kind of story like this, like it would just shatter the glass and then it would cut and it's like, he's psychic or whatever. But like we see the aftermath of that, like with signs and stuff falling off the
Yeah,
building,
there's, like, that big, like,
glass
water tower
showering
thing.
down on people. Like, we really see like the destruction caused by something so simple.
Right, which is insane too. Like, we see entire, like, massive, like, giga skyscrapers, like, with like all their windows shattering and, like, all of the glass descending, and it's just beautifully illustrated, like, transparent glass as it's falling over this large crowd. Nuts. Just what a technical feat. Like, and that's every shot in this film. It's a technical piece of majesty.
It's a visual artist's wet dream.
Which is me, so
Yeah,
I'm just
right.
this whole podcast is just gonna be going, oh god,
so
the
good.
whole time. So forgive me, but
Movie look good.
movie look real good. So you already know what I'm gonna rate it. But after that, the kid escapes. Cut back to Kanada's biker gang fighting the clowns, which are great. They're not overbaked. Like, they just have, like, the clown, like, faces on their helmets.
They're in the graphic novel. They're very overbaked,
And I love them for that.
That is one
in the
of the
graphic
things
novel.
that I'm glad they cut down on a little bit.
Yeah, the clown leader, like, in the graphic novel is a delight, though. Like, I love like how they have to become, like, fast friends by the end.
Yeah.
He's a fun character, but it is weird that he's wearing clown makeup the whole time, but he's great.
His name is Joker.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it is, isn't it? Yeah. So they're biking along, and the little boy appears, and I think it's Tetsuo, right,
Yeah.
who runs into him,
Yeah.
Kaneda's younger friend, and he slams into a force field and is ejected off of his motorcycle, and then the government shows up. They take the boy away, and
they take Tetsuo too.
and they take Tetsuo as well.
Well,
What key sequences do we need to
I think
pick from?
I think that's a good segue into talking a little bit about Tetsuo and Kaneda's relationship,
Yeah.
which is a very central aspect of the film, because like the impetus for that scene where Tetsuo crashes is because of, you know, sort of his dynamic with Kaneda. Kaneda is like the leader of the gang, you know, and we see through flashbacks throughout the film that like Tetsuo and Kaneda have been friends like since they were little. They're both orphans, you know, they're brought up. The whole gang is brought up and has to go to this sort of like truant academy trade school, you know. So they're you know, they're ruffians. They're kids who don't have like good adult role models. But you know, you see that because they came up together as friends, having Kaneda kind of take this position of status above Tetsuo, you know, is something that like really rankles with Tetsuo. Which we see a lot in the film, and especially at the beginning. The reason he's out front and Rex is because, you know, he's trying to beat Kaneda. You know, he's trying to go faster than him, and Kaneda has this like fancy new bike. So it's like that competition for like Tetsuo always feeling like he has to prove himself
that
to
he's
his...
under Kaneda's shadow.
Right, exactly, is you know, the impetus of this, and you know, that crash awakens his incredibly powerful like latent psychic ability. And so then a lot of the entire movie is like about that reversal of role where, you know, a lot of what Tetsuo is doing, why he sort of becomes a villain, is because, you know, he's powerful enough to do so. He's finally surpassed Kaneda, but not just Kaneda. He's surpassed humanity, which I think is really great. It makes for a super interesting dynamic between the protagonist and the antagonist too, because then, you know, Kaneda feels like it's his responsibility to stop Tetsuo, because, you know, Tetsuo is his responsibility. He's like a brother to him, but also like he's a member of his gang.
Oh yeah. And one of the things that this both the film and the graphic novel do exceptionally well is portray Tetsuo and Kaneda as rebellious youths.
Yeah.
Like, God, Kaneda's a little shit. Like,
Oh yeah,
he is such a little
sucks.
shit. He's the worst
He's
person.
terrible.
He does a number of things in this film that are just not likable at all.
No, they all suck. They're all just absolute little truant shitheads.
Yeah, and they would be. Like,
Oh,
and it
absolutely.
fits the world so well.
Absolutely.
Like, they don't try to idealize that. Like, Otomo doesn't try to, like, make you just want to be Tetsuo or Kaneda. Like, they are the protagonist characters, and the film cycles around them, but they exist very much so as commentary over youth. And so when Tetsuo starts achieving these godlike abilities, it's relatively terrifying because he's a kid.
Yeah.
Like, he shouldn't have that kind of power, period. Like, an adult couldn't handle that kind of power, let alone, like, this, like, 15-year-old boy.
And yeah, children tend to, especially teenagers, tend to have an underdeveloped sense of empathy as well.
Yes.
So it's easier and more understandable for like a kid to commit like acts of like truly horrific violence because they have yet to really like make the connection with like what human, like the value of human life, the value of life in general.
Now, one question I have for you guys is one of my only minor flaws in reading this movie is when Tetsuo really realizes he has powers, it's very abrupt in how he goes from like no powers to full on powers. There's no discovery in any way.
I agree. That's something that is lost between the graphic novel and the film.
And some of that is just time, constraints.
Yeah.
But
Oh, yeah.
It is. I agree with you. It's a little bit of a gripe I have with it too. It's very minor, and I think it's necessary just because you have to have him, go from being nothing to being essentially a god in a very brief span of time, and they're already like cutting down such a massive story into like really the key components. So some of that stuff just gets lost by the wayside. I agree. It would have been a little bit more interesting to see the development of that. Like in the graphic novel,
Much of it.
a big thing is that like
Great.
the government is like making these drugs that like
Was it good for health, bad for education? Is that like
Something
what
like that.
the thing says? Yeah.
that suppress people's like psychic abilities. And like a big thing with Tetsuo is that like as his powers are developing, like it's really painful. Like he's just like constantly having these horrible headaches and stuff. So he has to just like keep finding these drugs and just like eating them by the handful to keep himself from going crazy.
It's so cool.
And then like halfway through the run, a character tells him like the drugs are, you're powerful, but the drugs are like suppressing your abilities. If you can if you can go off of them, if you can cut yourself off and like you make it through the pain of withdrawal, then you will like untap power that you can't even imagine. And that's like,
and it's cool too because he's got that whole gang around him at
Right.
the time, so the power dynamic and like the politics of it are awesome. Because like that's which actually brings up a good point. Like one of the largest differentials between the graphic novel and the film is that halfway through the story and the graphic novel,
less than halfway through.
yeah. There is like a massive detonation, and the city is sent into like a post-apocalyptic scenario. And like you have all these youths who and survivors.
these different factions vying for control of
Yeah.
like the remnants of the city
In this like Mad Max like wasteland that was Neo Tokyo.
Yeah.
So like the majority of the film, or the majority of the graphic novel takes place in like a post-apocalyptic setting instead of Neo Tokyo, whereas the film itself takes place entirely in Neo Tokyo.
The film ends with that detonation, but that was one of the things that I found interesting that I like is that they are able to make that detonation be still a satisfying conclusion to the film, whereas in the graphic novel that detonation is the setup for just like the next chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they're able to take the same event and recontextualize it in a way that I really like.
Yeah, and it's cool because like they both provide good points of commentary, but the film does a good job of like wrapping up the emotional arc, and the thematic arc like by the end of the detonation. Whereas in the graphic novel, the detonation sort of represents the point where the adults are no longer in charge. And
I mean,
and that's
somewhat
which is kinda cool.
in the post-apocalyptic world, there are still plenty of adults, doing things and, making decisions. You've got your different factions.
Yeah,
but
it's
one
the
of
power has been put in the hands of the rebels. It's no
Yeah.
longer like the government no longer has the power.
That's the big distinction, is that the government no longer has the power.
Yeah.
In the lead up to that explosion, there is the coup where the general or the colonel, basically seizes control of the government because he recognizes what a threat Tetsuo is. And what will happen if he awakens Akira. That exists in the graphic novel too, but like after the detonation, it's like the colonel just becomes like a man. He just becomes a part of the resistance.
Yeah, which is a great arc for him. Like he's such a great character in the graphic novel.
Yeah, in the movie he's more of a
mechanism,
a cut and dry.
Yeah.
He's not like, I wouldn't say he's entirely villainous, but
no, yeah,
he plays the part of the villain sort of in this movie.
At least at the beginning, like towards the end, like he starts to show more of his humanity.
Yeah.
And then we sort of see him for what he truly cares about.
I mean, it comes down to like what he's willing to do to achieve a certain end, which is he's willing to do bad things to try to prevent
the worst thing.
thing.
Yeah, he's utilitarian.
Yeah, sure. Which is interesting. That's one of the things I like about this movie, is that the characters all make sense and they all have arcs. They all they all exist in the world that that makes sense. Which is not always the case with a lot of anime.
Or just like book to film adaptations in general.
Yeah.
Like I see it largely as a feat. The fact that like there's a pretty good amount of discourse over whether the graphic novel is better than the film because the film does such a good job condensing all of that material.
Well, I'm frankly in the camp that the film is better. I think that there's a lot of great stuff in the graphic novel that would be cool to be expanded on.
Yeah.
But I do think that because it's such a long form narrative, that it does get convoluted towards the end.
It's true.
And I think that the movie does a much better job of keeping the story tight
and concise.
It gets, it definitely delves into some very heady metaphysical ideas, but the story itself is tight and makes sense. It doesn't break its own logic. Which is the most important thing. And I think that it does a better job at that than the graphic novel does in a lot of ways.
I think, the graphic novel lets you sit in a few more concepts and mull over some of those details more and fleshes out some of those ideas. But no, overall, like I can definitely see that. I enjoy both for very different reasons.
Same.
So it's hard for me to choose. I don't think I could, but I do. God, I love both. And it is a fantastic adaptation.
One thing I want to talk about with this movie is it kind of falls in kind of my favorite camp of Japanese horror and sci-fi, in that they're kind of post-World War II responses to nuclearization in a lot of ways. You get it in, this movie, or like Godzilla, even like Hausu in a lot of ways. And like, I wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Like Junji Ito's stuff.
Yeah. And how this movie kind of plays with the idea of the nuclear bomb and resistance to kind of nuclearization.
Right.
And how it ends up ultimately being kind of inevitable. Because I think that there's a lot of really interesting ideas in there. I just wanted to unpack them a little bit.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I find immediately pretty fascinating is that while Akira deals with the same kind of like destructive force as nuclear explosions, whereas like that literal nuclear explosions are like man-made, and that they are like an example of like man's folly and man's destructive capability, whereas like the explosions in Akira are the result of like the next stage of human evolution, which I think you can you can look at those sort of parallel. In Akira, it's literally the next stage of human evolution, of these people like ascending to become higher beings, capable of breaking the laws of physics and reality. Whereas when we developed the atomic bomb, like, that was a very evolution, like a point of societal evolution and the evolution of warfare, both equally destructive. But I think that ultimately Akira has a little bit more of an optimistic resolution, because there is sort of that idea of like ascension and like creating new worlds through the destruction of the old.
Yeah, and in some ways I see it as kind of anxiety around Western technology after World War II for
Sure.
Japan in a lot of ways. After being hit by nuclear strikes, it's obvious that you don't want to approach some of those technologies as quickly, just because you see the power
It's a Pandora's box
that they can create, but
situation.
ultimately they do bring good nuclear power or technology that we take for granted even today.
Yeah, sure.
So,
Well, it's the same idea as change, right? Like, technology is neither good nor ill; it's both.
It's what you use it for. Yeah.
And it's the same with just like that concept of raw power and achieving godhead. It's a neat comparative, and I think there's a very strong reason for why like all of the ascended beings or all of like the psychics are children. In that is because it's trying to say that like humanity wasn't ready for the A-bomb. Like we were children, like handling something far more powerful than what we could understand and comprehend. And so that's that same comparative. And it's I think it's why it's so important that we see them also as old children.
Yeah.
Like, and that's why I think I think that's sort of the metaphor.
Well, and
there.
that's why I think Tetsuo is so much more destructive than the old children, because they are simultaneously much older and younger, than Tetsuo, and they have that understanding of like the responsibility of preventing destruction, whereas Tetsuo is older and he's more jaded.
Right. He's coming into adulthood.
And he's coming into adulthood and he's angry.
Mm-hmm.
So his all of his will is exerted towards destruction. He's coming out of childhood into adulthood. There's that loss of innocence. And that's because like he's gaining these powers as it's sort of like psychic puberty and regular puberty, whereas like the old children were, they developed these powers at a very, very young age, and that they were like tested upon and guided and sort of, taught to use their powers more responsibly, and they approached using their powers from a very childlike perspective, which I think is what makes that dynamic interesting as well.
Oh yeah, and it shows beautifully too, like when they try to early on in the film when they try to communicate with Tetsuo like in his dreams and communicate with him psychically, and you see these big like teddy bear amalgams and like weird like children's toys, which is
one of my favorite sequences in the movie that is nowhere in the graphic novel.
Yeah,
I do think that's
right.
one of the great things between the two is that scene where like the children come to him as like stuffed animals, but then they turn like huge and monstrous and grow teeth and claws and shit. But continue where you were going with that.
Well, it's cool, yeah, because Tetsuo is sort of projecting his own fears onto them, and they start becoming these like horrible creatures.
Yeah.
Because that's all like Tetsuo can do, because he's just this agent, he's just this catalytic agent of rage. Yeah, it's great. And when he just starts like losing it to make an excuse for like Tetsuo's like quick shift, they make it clear that like he's also like not at his mental fullest like while he's developing these abilities.
Sure,
like he's having a psychotic break. Like he's not at his best self at all. So there's so much that his brain is being flooded with that his agency is taken away from himself. Like, because he's just so drunk on the this psychic power, and he's got these horrible fever headaches, and his forehead is like fucking swelling throughout the film. It does it even more in the graphic novel. He's got a big old head by the end of it.
Well, I mean, even at the beginning, like, dude's got 5 head for days.
Yeah. And then he just has 10 head by the end of it.
Yeah.
One of my other favorite sequences in the film, especially like not just like from a visual perspective, but with how they do the audio for it, is when Tetsuo comes back for the first time, and like I say, he escapes from the lab, and he just joins up with his friends and doesn't really want to talk about it. And he has his first like psychotic break.
Oh yeah.
And you see the ground crack underneath him, but there's no sound, and he falls to his knees.
Well, there's no sound for the ground crumbling, but you can hear him breathing.
Yeah.
So there's still, yeah.
Exactly. Like there's no sound effects for that happening, and then like his guts just spill out of his chest, and it's really intense. It's super graphic.
That's one of my favorite scenes too. Yeah.
And then too, like there's no sound. There's just his friends talking in the background, moving. And you have him fall to his knees, but when his guts spill out, there's no sound at all from that effect. And you just see him like scrabbling and trying to like pull his guts back into him. And it cuts back with him like scrabbling, and he's fine. He's still whole.
Yeah, he's grabbing at nothing.
Yeah, and
and we keep getting like these flashes of just like writhing flesh, which is sort of foreshadowing what ends up happening to him at the end when he just becomes that like giant cancerous flesh baby. That stuff is great. The body horror in this movie is off the charts.
On point.
Yeah, it's so good.
Have you guys? I should have shown it before the podcast. Have y'all ever seen like any of Katsuhiro Otomo's like paintings and stuff, or like his watercolor pieces? Mm-hmm. They're so good. They're a huge inspiration for a lot of my character design. I'll have to pull it up at some point. It's like Junji Ito with a bit of like Cronenberg thrown in there, and it's all like technological body horror sort of stuff, like the anime equivalent of like Tetsuo the Bullet Man. Like it's awesome. Like 10 out of 10. Just Google image search like Katsuhiro Otomo, like, and his illustrations. Like they're really cool. Like Geiger-esque too. It's like all my favorite aesthetics just mold into one. Like his watercolors are dope. They're really awesome.
The body horror though works really well, kind of bringing that back to the nuclear kind of stuff, because
Absolutely.
It's a kind of loss of self within this kind of other.
Well, I mean,
whether it's technology or energy.
And I mean, Japan saw more than its fair share of like literal body horror in the aftermath of the explosions, you know, like the people who didn't die in the explosions, you know, getting radiation sickness, and children being born without eyes and deformed and stuff like that, you know, as a result of the atomic bomb and the radiation. Yeah, I think I saw a lot of those parallels, you know, with sort of the body betraying itself and mutating rapidly. That's all cancer is it's you know, uncontrolled cell growth and mutation.
Right.
Know?
And how cool is it that like when Tetsuo achieves this power, when he doesn't understand what to do with it, he becomes a cancer.
Right, because his body cannot contain the power that he is developing, so it, you know, just starts replicating and trying to consume, you know, what it can get its hands on. That's some of the stuff that is very, very cool in the graphic novel that they don't have time to put into.
It is.
Like the fucking sequence where, like, off the coast there's like the American fleet with like the aircraft carrier.
Yeah, the aircraft carrier is such a cool sequence.
And like Tetsuo like teleports to the aircraft carrier, and he starts like absorbing like the aircraft carrier and using it like against the other ships and stuff as like extensions of his body, and his body's just like devouring technology. Cool. It's very dope. That is one of the things that I really love in the graphic novel that we don't get in the film.
The whole battleship sequence is just fucking rad. Like, yeah, I hope they plan a little bit like in the live action that's gonna be coming out. But and of course one of my favorite little elements of this movie, or technological concepts in this film, is the Giga Satellite Soul.
Oh yeah,
like
which is
the
cool
fucking things. It's essentially, as I described it, it's just a massive like light like railgun like attached
laser
to a
satellite,
laser satellite, like awesome concept, especially because like around that same time in the 80s you had like Reagan with like his Star Wars initiative and like him literally trying to do that. And to a certain extent we still don't know anyway. Not going down that road.
This is not the podcast for that.
No, it's not the podcast for that. We're not gonna do that. But all theoretical. But yeah, no, Soul's really cool. And we get the sequence when they try to use it on Tetsuo.
Yeah.
And even that, you know, cannot stop him. Because
it does blow off his arm. But they do successfully cut off his arm with it. But yeah, then we get that awesome scene of like him just going up into space and like bringing down the satellite.
It's neat too because they just like all they do to show like how he can still breathe in space is there's just like this faint red outline like glow around him.
Yeah,
he's like generating his own little like
well
like
I mean
his,
he's a god at this point.
Pure
like,
energy.
That dude don't need to breathe. One of the things I do think is funny as a comparison between the graphic novel and the movie is Tetsuo's iconic caped look.
Yeah.
Whereas in the graphic novel, he like dons that cape as a way to like hide his severed arm, you know, before he like reconstructs it. Whereas in the movie, he's just like walking down the street,
like a destroyed boutique,
getting shot at by tanks, and he just like grabs a curtain that's like hanging out of a window and just rips it and like puts it on as a cape, which I think is kind of it's a little corny, but it also makes sense because like he's a kid and he's developed these like insane superpowers.
He see himself as Superman, as like this like little Ubermensch. So yeah, it's great. The tank sequences are awesome. Like that's the thing too, is like every one of those bits, like I'd be impressed to see like any still of that film drawn out, let alone animated. Like this is one of the few exceptions in animation where you cannot just about ever tell what is cell and what is background. Everything's moving, like, and it's nuts. Like the tanks look like they should just be still background images, and they're fully rotating and spinning around. Like his technical perspective is just nuts. It's so good. I love the tanks.
And I cannot reiterate enough how good this shit all looks in Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is setting the new standard. Like I don't think I ever want to watch this movie again not in Blu-ray.
No.
Well, like every other time I've seen it, it's been like DVD quality,
right?
And
same.
you do lose a lot of those
Absolutely.
finer details.
Yeah.
Like you still get like the attention to detail, like you still like get that it is a well animated film, but like man,
do you remember?
I can't stop gushing over this Blu-ray version.
What was the deal? It's been so long since I've read it. What was the deal with like the cool like orb tanks in the graphic novel?
Those things
were really cool. Like,
yeah, they're not in the movie at all. Yeah,
because they're really neat.
They're fully automated, and they were built in order to be able to maintain law and order in the event of a nuclear disaster where humans couldn't be on the surface because of the radiation. So they have these like spherical tanks with like little wheels that are just like rolling all over the city.
Yeah, they're super cool. Like these like gyro Ed 209s like fucking spinning around. Yeah. Like they're great. Yeah, God,
those are fun.
I'm gonna go back and read it. Like I need to. It's so much fun.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed my read through. One last comparison that I do want to talk about, and it's one of the things that I think that this movie does better than the graphic novel, is about who and what Akira is. In the graphic novel, they take a very literal approach. Like they awaken Akira early in the graphic novel. He's just like a kid. You know, he's just like a little kid who doesn't talk, but is like the most powerful being in the universe. And what essentially causes these explosions is like when he gets upset, you know, like a child throwing a temper tantrum, which, you know, is fun. And then, you know, after the disaster and the post-apocalypse, like Akira is like this child king who's not ruling at all, you know, like Tetsuo is his proxy, but like all of these people rally around their, you know, their godly child, Akira.
Which is great too,
Which
because
is-
Tetsuo already like has like a shadow complex where like he was always like underneath Kaneda's shadow, and even now that he's become a set like essentially a Superman, like he's still under someone's shadow. It's great. Like I love it. I love that the political dynamic of all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool and it's developed well in the graphic novel. But what I like so much about the movie is that like Akira is much more of an abstract concept
Yeah,
than like a literal character.
And it works so well.
Like you still have it's a child who is, you know, part of this government MK Ultra kind of experiment, you know, to develop these latent psychic abilities, but the idea of Akira is much more abstract. You know, we get this whole discussion about like Akira's power exists in all of us, but not everybody is like able to tune into it, and that like Akira draws his power from everybody else. And in the film too, like when they break into like the like cryo cell where they have been storing Akira, instead of just being like the kid in there, you know, he's dead. They have all of his organs in like
separate jars.
in separate jars and stuff.
Formaldehyde.
That, you know, Tetsuo takes and you know, is trying to study and absorb the power from and whatever. And I like that. I like that much better because the idea of Akira and Tetsuo as like the next stage of human evolution, you know, as higher ascended beings, it would make sense that they would be so far evolved that we can't really understand them, that they become more of a concept than a concrete thing. You know, it's like the tadpoles that humans evolved for, trying to understand what humans are. I think that in that way, the film does a much, much, much better job. I like Akira as more of like a metaphysical idea than as like a literal child god. You know, they both have their merits, but I think it's much more poignant in this movie.
It leaves a little more to think about.
It does.
too.
Well, because the twist is sort of reversed. Like, it's, what is this God thing we keep talking about? Oh, the twist is it's a child. Whereas in the graphic novel, it's sort of the opposite. It's this child God. And
well, yeah, and also in the graphic novel, like they talk about Akira a lot, but they don't hint at like his power or really at all. You know, it's like they keep mentioning Akira, and it's like we see this like big underground cryo chamber where he's being kept, so we understand that he's significant. But then even the first time we see him, it's not like there's not that understanding of like what he, you know, it's just like a kid that we then see can make like nuclear explosions. And even so, you don't get an idea of what Akira really means until the end of the graphic novel, which is at that point like 25 issues later.
yeah.
So I think that having that reveal at the end of the movie, you know, where like the pieces all do come back together and we just see like, oh, Akira is a child, a very buff child. I noticed that on this watch, a very ripped child. And you know, we only see him for like a second, and you know, like then he and Tetsuo kind of like fuse and ascend and, you know, go beyond to whatever. We don't really understand what that is. I think that that's a much better
bodies of light.
Right. And it's a more satisfying conclusion too, to then like see that once again 30 years after an Akira explosion destroyed Tokyo, you know, it's happened again, and it's kind of, you know, it's our fault as humans again, you know, and leaving you to think on like, well, we have in a way ascended, but at the same time we're repeating the same mistakes over and over again, you know.
Yeah. One last thing I want to talk about is next year the Summer Olympics are happening in Tokyo.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, which I find really prescient because this movie is
Yeah.
set in 2019, and one of the big plot points
Is
is
that
all
the
about
2020 Olympics are going to happen in Tokyo?
yeah, and they're building the stadium.
The
for
Olympic
it.
Stadium. Oh man.
That's right, because the throne that like Tetsuo sits on, like in both the film and graphic novel, like the iconic throne is for the Olympics. So you have the Olympic symbol like over him, which is great because
Yeah.
he's an Olympian. Like it's
Well, yeah,
it's
and I
great.
mean, in the graphic novel, like the Olympic arena is like ground zero of the explosion, and you've got like it creates this lake in the middle of Tokyo, and rising out of the lake is like the ruins of the Olympic Stadium, which is where Tetsuo and Akira like make their base. That's really cool. I did not know that the Olympics were happening in Tokyo next year.
I
didn't
hope
make that
I hope
connection.
they have some sort of callback
Some
shout
sort
out
of-
in their opening ceremony, but we will see.
They could figure out a way to do some sort of nod to Akira, and it would,
Yeah.
and it would,
Yeah,
and it would
Akira
make,
is-
and it would make sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
and
the big
that was my
progenitor of
question, yeah.
animated films, like in
Well,
Japan.
it was the highest budget anime movie of all time at that point. So
Yeah, I wonder what
sure.
unseated it. I wonder what was the next film.
I think it was Spirited Away.
Oh, that would make sense.
Yeah,
it would be a Studio Ghibli
Believe,
film.
Yeah. If it wasn't Spirited Away, it was almost certainly a Studio Ghibli film. It
Mm-hmm.
would have been Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke or something.
Mm.
I believe it was Spirited Away though. Don't quote me on that. Yeah. Do y'all wanna rate this? Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
I do have something else I want to talk about, but after we rate, we did also watch another of Katsuro Otomo's works, which
yeah.
was Construction Cancellation Order. But we'll talk about that after we rate.
Sure, we can talk about that briefly.
Yeah, we don't have much to say, I think, but it does have some cool.
Yeah, I'll start. I think you probably know from listening
Mm-hmm.
to us talk about it. Like this is a really well liked film among us, and I love this movie. And it was really fascinating to see it in the Blu-ray, and it looks so good with that actually good English dub. It was a great experience. I think the last time I watched this, I was either a little too stoned or too stupid to appreciate a lot of the things about the movie that I got from this watch, and maybe comparing it to the graphic novel gave me some of that as well. Ultimately, I have very few gripes with this movie, all very minor stuff. It's gonna be a very strong 4.5 out of 5 for me.
It's a 5 out of 5 for me. I adore this film. It's one of my tops. It's one of my best of all time. Like, yeah, 5 out of 5. I love this movie.
No surprise there.
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
The more I've seen it, the more I've come to appreciate the story in a lot of ways. I think seeing a better dub of it really helped a lot.
Yeah. Also, like it's a lot to take in on just like a first watch. Like I definitely think that there is great merit to watching it multiple times and like trying to get different perspectives. And
Yeah,
stuff on it.
yeah. I do still have some very minor gripes, but overall, it is still an incredible movie and a technical accomplishment for
No
sure.
kidding.
So I'm gonna give it a strong 4.5 as well.
Hell yeah. Well, that's a powerful 4.7 out of 5 pods for Akira. If you haven't seen it and you like anime, like, geez, check it out for sure. I will say, absolutely try to get your hands on the Blu-ray version. The difference is noticeable and 100% worth it.
Staggering,
100%
honestly.
worth it. And if you're going to watch a dub, make 100% sure that it is the 2001 English dub, not the one from the 90s, because fuck that one. Otherwise, just watch it in Japanese with the subtitles. Hell yeah. Yeah, Cleve, well, let's talk a little bit briefly about
Construction Cancellation Order.
Cancellation Order.
So, it is a short that is one of 3 films that are, one of 3 shorts that compile the film Neo Tokyo. Otomo did a couple of other shorts. I think there's Robot Carnival and a few more, and I forget their names. But I thought it'd be fun for us to watch it really quickly before we watched Akira, to see some of his other work. And some of his other like high concept ideas. The premise is well, it's not straightforward per se. It's relatively high concept, but it's fairly minimal. A foreman is sent to this fully automated, self-constructing island because the company that instigated it has tried to cancel the production, but the robots keep building anyway, and no one knows why. So this guy's sent in to try and stop the construction. Once again, it runs along some similar themes as like Otomo's other works, like, you know, considering like runaway technology and you know
totally.
what can happen. It's just cool because in this case, like it's exclusively around these robots that just want to continue to build until they cannot anymore. They just wish to exist, even if it means their own end. And I do love that, like this, like seeing the city like destroying itself as it's building itself.
Being on a deadline, so the robot foreman keeps like working the other robots like overtime and faster, so they keep, you know, breaking and destroying themselves in parts of the city. But it's like you know, the deadline's coming up, so that means we have to work even harder.
Meanwhile, the foreman is like, "No, there's no deadline. It's over. Like, stop."
Yeah, it's very much an Ouroboros. Technology just devouring itself.
They work like they're making a AAA video game or something. But no, the thing I really liked about this one is it was much lighter in tone and more comedic.
Yes.
Like thematically, it's still
especially
very dark,
initially. Yeah,
but,
it takes
you know,
a dark turn towards the end, but yeah, for like the setup is a lot lighter.
It's definitely a little campier. Like the robot foreman is a very goofy character. You know, he's got a little hard hat on, and I
love his design.
He has a wire
so much.
like he's directly plugged into a power source somewhere, but it's just like this insanely long cord that allows him to get anywhere he needs to in the city, which I think is a really fun design. Weirdly, this movie made me extremely anxious, or the short film made me extremely anxious, which I think is like probably part of the intention, but like I was just watching this and like watching the series of events, and it's like the definition of insanity, you know, doing the same thing expecting a different result, and it felt like I was going crazy a little bit. Like it was just like really kicking in like my anxiety.
Yeah, this film
in kind of an unpleasant way, but I think that speaks well of like how well paced it is, and the animation is still really great.
Oh, it's out of this world. Yeah, like just to talk a little bit more, because I just want to like break down like the foreman's the robot foreman's design, because like he's so cool. Like the fact that like he seems to have like some sort of like a gasoline power source, because he's constantly backfiring.
Yeah, like an old muffler.
Yeah, and like out of his hips, so he's just like. And he's like being run by like his chest is basically just a generator, so he's constantly like shaking and quivering, and it looks like he has like cerebral palsy.
When it gets worse and worse over the course of the film, like his movement gets more and more jittery and ineffective.
And you're just waiting for like him to just fall apart like at any moment, and it helps with it's a wonderful tension builder. They lock the foreman, the human foreman, away in his room, and the robot foreman keeps bringing him like his meal, and progressively the meal starts to become more and more just robotic parts and components.
I did think that was really funny. By the end, it's just like a tray full of like gears and oil,
and there's even like a little robot
shit.
like crawling around like on the tray.
I thought that was really clever.
And it starts out with just him like finding like a nut like in his food, you know, like just like a screw or something.
That's really great.
Like every time he wakes up in the morning, they play like the same classical music track like over and over. By the end of it, the city really begins to just devour itself. We have the main character just like trapped in this room looking out. You have these awesome shots of like all these like dead foremen, like these other dead foreman robots and other construction workers, and it goes like it does like a full night and day cycle with them, and their glowing eyes at night, and then daylight comes again and the water's flowing around them, and it just looks
the city is
good.
flooding. That's another thing I liked, is I love the setting of this short too. It's like the company has been contracted to build this city in some, what I assume is like South American country.
I think it says it's
it's like in the jungle. It's a made up country, but it seems to be South American.
Yeah.
And that the reason the order has been canceled is because there's been a coup in the government.
Yeah.
and the new government is like, no, we don't want this anymore, like cancel building the city. But it's the rainy season, so like it's just raining constantly, and just like the waters keep rising, and as the city is tearing itself apart, it's also flooding.
Yeah, and you get these wonderful shots too of like the construction robots like attached to a like a bulldozer, just like driving into the water because it doesn't
Or
care.
the one where
it has one purpose.
There's one that's like trying to stop, like dam the flood of water, and it just keeps trying to like force a wall into place, and the wall just like keeps breaking.
Yeah.
And the water keeps coming through. Like visually, it's really excellent. It's great. It's a really good example of like taking a very simple, narratively simple premise, but you know, with some more high concept ideas, and you know, giving it like the perfect runtime. It's about what, 15 minutes or so?
Yeah,
right there.
15, 20 minutes. I love the idea of modernization, but at what cost?
Right.
This
And like reaching the level of automation to the point that even your like building cities is completely automated. Love that.
Super cool.
I think, you know, and it's poignant for the time we live in too, where more and more stuff is being automated, and it's like, you know, it's important to think that there can definitely be some danger associated with automation.
I mean, that's the beauty of like Otomo's work in general, and like really good like hard science fiction. Like when the science is good and the concepts are good, it only becomes more relevant over time.
Well, yeah,
like,
that's the
Akira's
thing.
set in 2019, but like it will still be poignant and relevant like for as long as there are people.
And
like,
that's the thing about like good sci-fi, is it usually has a fair amount of foresight. You know, you can look at things in the modern world and look back at things like fucking 1984 and Brave New World and be like, they predicted it. It's like, well, I mean, they just had an understanding of like science and technology and like the advancement of human civilization.
Most of Vern's concepts like were made in his lifetime.
Yeah.
Like the submarine, etc. Like all of those things were created. Whereas like Wells, for instance, like we still don't have like heat rays and
or time machines.
Yeah, exactly. But
Well,
and both are cool
maybe.
and valid. Oh, well, Reagan, etc. No. So to conclude, on unless y'all had any other points, to conclude the narrative, the main character escapes, and we see him like riding a cable, like just trying to get to the center of this mass and find how
The computer brain or whatever.
Yeah, to shut it down, and we just see him sliding down a cable, and then it just tracks up to this massive robot skyscraper beast with all these big cables and this massive sentient thing, and it fades out. Like we recognize like that he's not going to be able to do anything.
Well,
like we know it's futile.
Also, what I like, my favorite part about the ending is as he's leaving, we hear the like radio in his room come on from like the company headquarters, and they're like, "Hey, the government has retaken control. Like the order is back on. Don't cancel the construction.
That's right.
Like don't cancel. We're on. We got to make it by the deadline." Like at this point, the city is in complete shambles, and like the dude is going to try to destroy the brain running everything.
Yeah.
So love that that little note of futility there at the end. It's always fun.
Twist of fate.
Hell yeah.
Otomo's so good at like setting up those little like micro apocalypses,
Yeah.
like these little scenarios where like there's a post-apocalyptic event going on, but just right there. You
Right,
know,
it's
like it's
not-
not a
it's not
global
worldwide,
situation.
yeah.
Like, and that's the cool thing, like about Akira too. Like the apocalypse is only going on in Tokyo, like, and no one else can get in, and so like,
Right.
it's super fun. Like that, like the rest of the world is still operating fine. And it gives you a cool window to view it in. And to me, it also feels more believable. It's not saying like a Mad Max scenario where the entire world is fucked. It's just this one spot. And we just zero in on like those personal stories and events.
Well, I mean, like, that's the thing, is, like, Mad Max is real. It's taking place in lots of parts of the world right now, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
You know?
like
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's like apocalypse is almost never on like a large scale. Mad Max is a real thing in a lot of parts of Africa. The fact that we look around at like what we're living in the first world, and it's like we don't even think about that kind of shit.
No,
You know?
yeah.
We so much of like our culture is based on thinking about apocalypse from a like a worldwide perspective.
The apocalypse
And it's
just
probably-
hasn't hit your neighborhood yet.
and like the thing is that realistically, like being a part of a first world country, if we do experience apocalypse, at that point it probably is worldwide.
I mean,
which is unfortunate because like we can
way, we do see some of that with climate catastrophes as
Absolutely.
of late, having the whole West Coast burning to the ground,
yeah,
you know,
seriously,
hurricanes, floods.
polar vortexes in the Midwest. It's climate change is real. And if you don't think so, then don't add us.
Which brings us to our sponsor. This episode was brought to you by Dembly's Denial Buds. Tired of hearing about how the shitty direction the world is going in? Put in Dembly's Denial Buds. You'll never have to worry about all the things that are definitely real ever again. Dembly's Denial Buds.
Did it say how much they went for?
Sorry, I can't hear you. What was that?
How much did they cost?
Yeah, it is a really nice day, isn't it? Yeah.
When I put in my Dimbley's Denial Buds, anytime anybody tries to tell me anything bad about, like, the environment or the state of our government, Dimbley's Denial Buds just tell me how big my penis is. Thanks, Dimbley's.
Did you say the bit? I can't hear you with these buds in. Did we do it? I think we did it.
We did it.
Did we do it?
No.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.
All right, that'll bring us to the end of this episode. Thank you, as always, for listening. Next week, we're going to be talking about Return of the Living Dead, which is your pick, Ben? Or is
We
it
have a
just-
special guest
We will
next week.
Well, hopefully
so-
we'll have a special guest. I'm not going to make promises I can't keep. But yeah, tune in next week for a different kind of apocalypse. It's zombies. Everybody's favorite zombie apocalypse. I'm excited. I've actually never seen Return of the
Ooh,
Living
you
Dead
guys are
all the way
in for
through.
a treat.
I've seen a lot of clips from the film, like some of the more famous scenes, but I've never seen the film all the way through.
You guys are in for a treat.
So,
it's one of my favorite zombie movies.
I'm very, very excited. Well, if you like the show, hit the 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you get pew pew. I gotta add 2 more. Well, that's 6 stars, Cleveland. That metric doesn't even exist.
Hey, if you can do it, though, do it.
If you can dream it, then you can do it.
Yeah, this is a 5-star podcast.
This is
as far as I'm
hit
concerned.
those 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever
6
else
star,
you get
though.
your podcasts. If it has the option to give us 6 stars, then do that. Leave us a nice review too. You can follow us on Twitter at PodPeoplePod. You can follow us on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/PodPeoplePod. See the list of all the films we've talked about on the show, our average ratings, links to those episodes, all of that goodness. As we mentioned last week, which we'll probably still be plugging for a little while, we have released our prologue for It Stares Back.
Yes, we
for the
have.
game we've been working on for 2 years. It is 100% totally free. All you have to do is join our Discord, which can be found through our website at lightarcstudio.com. Sign up for the Discord, join us, come talk to us, and when you join the Discord, you will automatically be sent a link to download the game. 3+ hours of content for free.
Oh, yeah. And if you're having trouble finding it, just Google It Stares Back.
Yeah, our
It'll come
SEO
right
is
up.
good. Yeah, you should.
Yeah,
You'll
come
you'll
right
find
up.
us.
We're right
Can they
here.
find it through Twitter?
Do we have a link to the Discord on the Twitter account? We should. If
We will.
when this episode goes up, we will.
I'm pretty sure we do. I'm pretty sure we do.
If we don't already.
At the very least,
So-
like our pin messages is like the trailer and stuff. But
yeah. So you can. There are a lot of different ways you can get to the game, but we would really love it if you would play it and let us know what you think.
Yeah, and on top of that too, we've also started live streaming.
We're doing some Twitch streams.
Just today, I finished up my first character painting done via live stream. It's pretty cool. It's a spooky Mothman. So if you want to see updates on that, just track our Twitter, Light Art Studio, and our Discord as well. And you can see all the cool art being painted in real time.
And I just did a blind playthrough of Pony Island on Twitch as well. So our Twitch name is Light Arc Studio as well, right?
Just Light Arc.
Just Light Arc. Okay. LIGHTARC. Check us out on Twitch. And we announce our streams and stuff on the Discord. So join the Discord.
Yay.
You can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Van Awesome. All that stuff.
I'm at Mr. Sheets.
The Light Arc Twitter is at Light Arc Studio. Cleveland tweets for that.
Yep. You can also find my work on ArtStation under Cleveland Mosier or Iron Prism. And look at all that cool art.
Hell yeah. Well, thanks for listening. Tune in next week for the Return of the Living Dead. And until next time, Tetsuo! Kaneda! Tetsuo!
Kaneda!